Clara crossed the marble lobby of the Midtown Manhattan branch with a steady mix of elegance and determination, her navy blazer giving her an air of authority that was hard to miss. Normally, the place was a well-oiled machine, where people followed routines and everyone spoke in hushed voices. But as soon as Clara moved toward the front desk, the atmosphere began to change. There was a kind of tension in the air that made people slow down and glance sideways. Some employees and customers simply paused, sensing something was off. Behind the counter was Alejandro, a young manager who had only been at the bank for a few months. Instead of greeting Clara politely or asking how he could help, he narrowed his eyes and looked her up and down. He barely nodded and showed clear impatience, as if her presence was an inconvenience to his busy morning. Without bothering to hear her out, Alejandro immediately doubted her reason for being there. He asked a series of pointed questions in a tone that made it clear he was questioning whether she belonged. The scene played out in front of quite a few clients and staff members. People shifted uncomfortably, and a couple of them started filming on their phones, realizing that these moments, seemingly mundane, could easily reveal something deeper, a situation about more than just a bank visit, maybe the beginning of something bigger. Alejandro, believing his authority in the bank lobby gave him the right, raised his voice and told Clara she needed to leave. He insisted that this was an exclusive space and made it clear, with cold and deliberate words, that she had no business being there. His tone left no doubt that he wanted to humiliate her in front of everyone. The few conversations in the lobby died down completely, and all eyes were now watching the scene unfold. Cell phones, already pointed in Clara's direction, were recording everything, catching every harsh word Alejandro threw at her. Clara, though, did not flinch or raise her voice. She stood still, her expression even and her voice calm. Without hesitation, she explained in a clear and steady way why she was there, never matching Alejandro's volume or returning his rude attitude. It was almost like she refused to be pulled into the drama, and her composure made it obvious she had nothing to hide. This unexpected calmness seemed to surprise not only Alejandro, but also the people gathering around. A hush fell over the crowd, and many began to wonder if there was more going on than they first thought. What exactly was at stake here, and who was really in the wrong? Just as things seemed to reach a breaking point, Marcus, the veteran security guard, stepped over from his post by the main doors. Marcus had been working in the Midtown branch for more than 15 years and was known for his calm head and sense of fairness. He moved carefully, glancing between Alejandro and Clara, clearly aware that whatever decision he made could have wider consequences than just following an order. Alejandro signaled to him, expecting Marcus to back him up and force Clara to leave. But Marcus hesitated, not immediately jumping in with a response. There was a heavy pause as Marcus quietly assessed the situation, his instincts telling him this wasn't as simple as enforcing a rule. Meanwhile, the tension in the lobby kept building. Some clients had started streaming the entire event on their phones. Among the crowd was Natalie, a popular social media influencer who often shared opinions on justice and equality. She began narrating what was happening to her thousands of followers on a live feed. As her audience grew minute by minute, the story started to spread far past the lobby walls. Notifications buzzed in the hands of people across the city and even in other states as the number of live viewers shot up. Within what felt like seconds, the incident was out of the bank's control, and the pressure was building for someone to do the right thing. As the lobby buzzed with energy and the tension grew, Lisa, the assistant manager, quietly approached the group. Well respected for her professionalism, Lisa was known for always trying to keep the peace in sticky situations. Still, everyone understood her unspoken loyalty to Alejandro. In moments like this, she tended to stand beside him, struggling to find her own voice beneath his firm directions. Lisa took a quick look at Clara, taking in the details. The fine stitching on her blazer, the elegant ring on her finger, and the calm way she held herself. Something felt off about Alejandro's story, but Lisa hesitated, not quite ready to push back against her manager's authority in front of so many witnesses. While Alejandro remained focused on repeating his demands, Clara smoothly reached in her bag and brought out a distinct metallic card, one reserved for a select few of the bank's top clients. She placed it quietly on the counter, not making a scene about it, but clearly signaling her status. Alejandro, caught up in his speech, barely registered the move. However, Lisa noticed immediately. The realization started to chip away at her certainty. Lisa began to see the situation in a new light, sensing that perhaps the narrative about Clara did not line up with what was really happening. Her doubts started to grow, mixing with the mounting pressure in the quickly crowding lobby. The lobby was growing louder as more people gathered, drawn in by all the commotion. Every step Clara and Alejandro took seemed to be followed by the hum of whispered conversations and the glow of cell phones pointed in their direction. Feeling his authority slip away, Alejandro doubled down. He told Clara, in a sharp tone, that if she did not leave immediately, he would have no choice but to call the police. He made it clear he thought she was just an intruder causing trouble and disrupting the bank's order. The crowd's mood shifted noticeably. Anger and frustration simmered as people witnessed what was happening. Almost at once, social media feeds filled with clips and live streams, folks sharing their outrage at Alejandro's obvious bias. But through all of this, Clara stayed absolutely calm. She looked directly at Alejandro and said, just loud enough for everyone to hear, that she would give them 2 minutes to resolve the situation. Her clear, steady voice surprised both the staff and the customers, catching everyone off guard. All eyes fixed on Clara, sensing that she was in control in a way that no one had expected. The seconds ticked by, each one stretched out, and it felt like the whole lobby was holding its breath, certain that something big was about to unfold. As the minutes stretched on, Clara calmly reached into her pocket and dialed a number. Her voice was low as she spoke, using words that sounded harmless, but carried an obvious weight to anyone really listening. She referred to a certain executive file and mentioned a meeting at room 27, terms that didn't mean much to most people in the lobby, but would be recognized by a small circle in the banking world. When she ended the call, she did so with a polite but unmistakable authority, as if she was used to giving instructions that mattered. Alejandro, who had spent the past 10 minutes feeling in control, suddenly looked shaken. He tried to sound firm, but his voice cracked just a bit as he addressed Clara again, asking if maybe they could talk in private. It was clear he sensed things slipping from his grip, and the energy in the room shifted as surely as the air before a storm. Lisa, the assistant manager, watched with a growing sense of dread. She realized, maybe for the first time, that this situation was spiraling way above their pay grade. Around them, the crowd leaned in, whispering and speculating, while online, new hashtags began trending as people tried to guess what would happen next. As Clara's quiet countdown reached its end, everyone in the lobby looked toward the main entrance, half expecting something big to happen. Suddenly, the sound of fast footsteps echoed through the space. A man in a navy suit, clearly out of breath, hurried in, glancing around until his eyes landed on Clara. This was Charles, one of the top executives from the bank's New York headquarters. The flicker of relief in his eyes quickly gave way to a look of panic as he realized who Clara really was. He rushed forward, greeting her with a respect that left no doubt about her importance. Right then, the entire story shifted. A hush fell over the crowd as Charles addressed Clara, not as a confused customer, but as the founder and lead shareholder of the whole banking organization. That information shot through the lobby, wordless at first, and then with a wave of gasps and sudden realization. Alejandro's face went pale, and Lisa looked like she might faint. Even Marcus, the tough security guard, stared in disbelief. Customers put down their phones, some with their jaws still open. It hit everyone at once. What had just played out in front of 1,000 watching eyes was so much bigger than anyone had guessed, and every second had been caught on camera. Charles didn't waste time. He stepped in front of the crowd, his voice ringing out clear as he apologized openly to Clara. He spoke with a tone everyone could hear, making sure to show her the respect that her true role deserved. He admitted that mistakes had been made, and his sincere words, mixed with a bit of fear, hung heavy in the air. People around the lobby straightened their backs, suddenly aware they were in the presence of someone with far more power than they had imagined. The atmosphere flipped from tense and dramatic to a weird mix of embarrassment and quiet awe. Some folks avoided looking at Clara, while others did their best to appear invisible. Everyone seemed to realize at once how wrong the treatment had been. Alejandro was shaking, no longer the confident manager he'd been only minutes earlier. His hands trembled as he tried to find something to say, but his voice barely came out. He could feel eyes locked on him, Lisa's disappointed glance, Marcus's steady gaze, even random customers who now saw him in a totally different light. What had happened in those last few minutes undid years of careful career building. Alejandro's sense of shame was matched only by the shock on every other face in the bank, as dozens of strangers judged him in real time. Without waiting any longer, Clara calmly announced that she needed to see both Alejandro and Lisa upstairs in the executive offices right away. No one argued or hesitated. The three of them walked over to the elevator together, passing by the curious and silent crowd. As the elevator doors slid closed behind them, the noisy lobby faded away, leaving a heavy silence in its place. Inside the small space, the tension was thick. Both Alejandro and Lisa kept their eyes on the floor, fidgeting with their hands, each of them running through the last half hour in their minds with regret. As the elevator began its slow climb to the top floor, Clara finally spoke, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, calm, but carried no warmth. She turned to Alejandro and asked him directly what had made him treat her the way he did, probing without accusation, but with a clear expectation for the truth. Her words cut right to the heart of his actions, exposing the prejudice behind his assumptions with a directness he couldn't sidestep. Alejandro stammered an apology, trying to explain that he thought he was following protocol, but everything he said sounded hollow. Clara met his answers head-on, not raising her voice, but making it obvious she was not going to let bias go unchallenged. When the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, they stepped into a whole different world. Quiet hallways lined with art, wide windows showing the New York skyline, and the distant sound of phones and soft voices. It was polished and impressive, but the mood between Clara, Alejandro, and Lisa made even this beautiful place seem uncomfortable. They walked straight into the main boardroom, where a few directors had been sitting, busy with emails or talking in low voices. The group's sudden arrival turned every head in the room. Alejandro, still shaken, quietly mentioned Code 7, a phrase none had heard used except in the most serious circumstances, and all conversation stopped at once. Clara moved to the center of the room, not bothering to take one of the padded leather chairs. Instead, she stayed standing and connected her phone to the room's massive television. Without any introduction, she played the video that had already spread online, the footage from the lobby, showing every awkward, wrong moment. No one tried to look away. For a minute, the only sound was the muffled audio from the clip, and then a heavy, uncomfortable silence. The board members sat frozen, faces changing as the full weight of what had happened landed in the room, and the seriousness of the mistake was suddenly impossible to ignore. The entire board sat in shock as the video played, watching the moments of discrimination and misuse of authority unfold right in front of them. Some exchanged anxious glances, realizing all at once how damaging this could be not just for their own jobs, but for the bank as a whole. It was clear that if this went public any further, if it hadn't already, the fallout would be massive. Real fear crept into the room, especially for Harriet Johnson, the only other black member on the board, who sat at the table gripping her notes. For Harriet, the whole thing cut deeper than just business. She felt the weight of every unsaid word, knowing this was about more than just one mistake. Clara did not waste time on speeches. She dove straight into the hard facts, projecting real-time feeds onto the monitor that displayed bursts of negative comments, angry posts, and hashtags that included the bank's name. She explained in direct terms the legal trouble they could face and how much money they might lose from lost business and possible lawsuits. With every slide, the energy in the room grew heavier and more serious. Everyone could sense that the time for talk was over. They needed real answers, and quickly, or risk losing everything they had built over so many years. The room stayed quiet for a few long seconds after Clara's presentation, everyone looking at Alejandro, waiting for him to say something. Clara didn't let him off the hook. She called him out plainly, asking him to explain his actions in front of the entire board and staff present. With nowhere to hide and every eye in the room on him, Alejandro swallowed hard and finally spoke up. In a halting voice, he admitted that he had acted out of bias, making quick judgments about who belonged in those upper floors and who did not. He tried to steady himself, but there was nowhere to escape from the truth anymore. As he confessed, even though the words came out reluctantly, everyone understood that this moment would change the course of his career. There would be no going back from here. But Clara had something different in mind than most expected. She said she was not interested in revenge or even in big settlement payouts that could embarrass the company more. What mattered to her, she explained, was that real changes happened so this sort of thing could never happen again. Not to her, not to anyone. Her words caught people off guard. Instead of anger, she showed strength, and it made even those who had felt uneasy before look at her with new respect. With that, what started as a disaster now felt like the beginning of some much-needed change. Clara took a step forward and told the board she had already started working on a set of solutions. She laid out her plan in simple, direct language, making it clear to everyone that this was not just about a single mistake, but about the whole system. She proposed starting with mandatory training sessions to help everyone in the bank spot and stop bias before it turned into real harm. She talked about holding monthly audits, making sure every branch and department stayed accountable. There would also be new systems installed to monitor how customers and clients were being treated, real, concrete ways to catch issues early. The board listened closely, nodding as Clara spoke. No one tried to argue or slow things down. They all seemed to realize that this was both urgent and totally necessary. When she finished, the board took a formal vote, and it was unanimous. Every proposal she had offered was approved, and the mood changed a little, shifting from shame to a careful kind of optimism. The board also knew they needed to act quickly on the people involved. Alejandro was given a choice: resign on the spot and receive only the bare minimum severance, or be fired for cause. He knew what he had to do. As for Lisa, she was put on probation, recognizing that she had shown she could learn and change if given the chance. As the meeting wrapped up and people started to gather their things, directors spoke in low, determined voices about next steps. The hallways outside grew busy as staff prepared to roll out Clara's plan. Before he left, Alejandro paused by Clara, looking unsure, then offered a soft, "I really am sorry." Clara met his look, her eyes kind yet steady, and told him that regret only means something if it leads to real change. She did not sugarcoat it or give him an easy out. She just calmly reminded him that taking responsibility is the only way forward. Alejandro nodded. Understanding this was as much closure as he would get. Meanwhile, William Brooks, who was in charge of risk oversight, stood up and owned his part in missing the warning signs. He promised the room that he would lead the reforms himself and keep everyone updated at each stage. Everyone could tell he meant it. At that moment, the mood around the big table started to shift. Where there had been only embarrassment and nervousness before, there was now a sense that things could actually get better if they all worked at it. Even as people left for their offices, there was a new feeling of hope for the future. Over the next several days, news of the incident traveled fast, first through Manhattan and then all over the state and country. Headlines on every major outlet mentioned the bank's quick response and Clara's role in pushing for real change. Instead of shying away from the publicity, the bank's leadership leaned into it, openly sharing the steps they were taking and talking about what had happened. Community organizations and national broadcasters reached out, asking for interviews with Clara and the team. Even people who had never heard of First Avenue Bank before started seeing it as a place willing to face its mistakes head-on. The bank rolled out the new initiative, which everyone soon started calling the Clara Protocol. Training kicked off for every employee, not just in the main New York office, but in every branch from coast to coast. The bank sent regular updates to customers, explaining what was happening and how services would change for the better. People who had felt let down by banks before now saw something different, a promise to listen and get it right. The public conversation shifted fast. Where the story first began as a scandal, it quickly grew into an example of how owning up and fixing problems can turn a mess into progress. About 6 weeks later, the mood inside the branch on Madison Avenue felt completely different from before. Colorful posters lined the hallways, sharing messages about respect, belonging, and inclusion. Brand new monitors sat at every work desk, keeping track of client interactions to make sure everyone was being treated fairly and with care. Customers noticed the change as soon as they walked in, from the way staff greeted them to the new forms that encouraged feedback on every visit. Gabriella Kim had just stepped in as the new branch manager, and it was obvious she believed in what she was doing. She made it a point to say hello to each person on her team every morning, checked in with visitors, and encouraged real talk about the changes the bank was making. Under her leadership, people seemed more at ease. Even little things like offering a cup of coffee to someone waiting in line or helping a confused customer with their phone app happened without hesitation. Lisa, who had been put on probation not long before, worked hard and took her role seriously. Each month, she pulled together clear reports showing customer satisfaction had climbed, while complaints had dropped a lot. The results were real, and everyone, from tellers to executives, could feel the positive shift spreading through their workplace. As time moved on, the changes at First Avenue Bank caught the eye of people far beyond Madison Avenue. Word spread through articles, online forums, even finance podcasts, and soon banks across the United States started paying attention to the so-called Clara Protocol. Several competitors began reaching out, asking for advice on rolling out similar training and monitoring at their own branches. Some even sent teams to visit in person, eager to learn what was working. It was not just rival banks taking notice. Federal regulators from Washington commended the effort in press releases and at industry conferences. They held up the new practices as a model of how to prevent discrimination and foster trust in the financial world. In just a short time, First Avenue Bank went from being at the center of trouble to setting the standard for everyone else. People from all sorts of backgrounds, especially those in underserved communities, started opening accounts in big numbers, feeling more confident that this was a place where everyone belonged. The bank even received awards for inclusion and ethics from national business associations. What had started out as a tough and embarrassing lesson ended up showing the whole company, and everyone watching, that doing the right thing could also be a winning strategy. During those same months, Alejandro went through a lot of tough moments, both at work and in his personal life. Losing his job at First Avenue Bank had been a wake-up call that he could not ignore. After a lot of thinking, he made up his mind to do something about the mistakes he had made. Instead of staying stuck in regret, he signed up for classes about diversity and inclusion at a local university in Brooklyn. The discussions there were challenging, forcing him to look at situations in ways he had never considered. He listened a lot more than he spoke, slowly learning what it really meant to lead with fairness and empathy. That change did not go unnoticed. People he used to manage heard about his efforts and reached out to say he was setting an example for others. Alejandro's journey, with all its ups and downs, started being shared at local management courses as a story that showed how reflection and humility could spark real growth. Meanwhile, Lisa's hard work paid off in an unexpected but welcome way. Not long after all the changes, she was offered a promotion to oversee regional training. Now responsible for hundreds of staff from branches all over the Northeast, she put her experience to good use, helping others build a culture of respect and openness. Her story became proof that real progress is possible when people are willing to be honest with themselves and change. The influence of the Clara Protocol reached far beyond New York, crossing state lines, and even popping up in banking circles all over the country. Banks in Chicago, Los Angeles, and Dallas were among the first outside the East Coast to officially adopt versions of the protocol, weaving it into their own staff training and customer service policies. Word of how things had changed at First Avenue Bank soon found its way into business school classrooms, with professors at places like Harvard and NYU breaking down the story as a textbook example of smart leadership during difficult times. Clara herself kept busy, especially through the new Minority Business Support Fund she had helped establish. The fund started channeling real dollars into neighborhoods that had been overlooked for years, helping small grocery stores in the Bronx, tech startups in Atlanta, and family-run restaurants in Detroit get off the ground or expand. Those businesses, once just big dreams, now provided steady paychecks and hope in their communities. Inside First Avenue Bank, you could feel the difference too. Employees came from all sorts of backgrounds, and community organizations looked forward to joint projects instead of turning away suspiciously. More than just rules or new slogans, there was a genuine shift in how people treated one another, breaking the old patterns, building something stronger and more fair for everyone. 1 year after everything began, Clara stepped through the doors of the Madison Avenue branch, feeling a sense of nervous excitement she had not known in a long time. The lobby looked almost unrecognizable, busy and bright, with banners celebrating diversity and tables set up with snacks and drinks. People from all around the city had come to mark the anniversary of the bank's turnaround. Staff who had been there through all the upheaval mingled with new hires, and customers chatted in small groups alongside community leaders and friends from local charities. There was laughter, a few tears, and a real feeling of pride in the air. Clara smiled as she talked with old colleagues, sharing memories of how tough the past year had been, but also how worth it all the effort felt now. During the short speeches, several people took the microphone to talk about what had changed in their own lives and in the bank. When Clara spoke, she did not focus on her own role, but on the courage people had shown to call out what was wrong and then do the hard work to fix it. The crowd listened closely, many nodding in agreement. Standing there, it was clear that the story of this branch had become something larger, a true sign that facing up to mistakes with honesty could change lives and maybe even inspire others to do the same.